There's a lot of drama going on in comic book YouTube land. So I had to go outside and touch some grass. You know, that's what the kids say, touch grass. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this one, we're outside. We got a lot to talk about. We're gonna do a walking vlog. I realized that I opened up the video not actually touching grass. It was more the, what do you call it? Weeds, I suppose. Dead weeds. I was trying to do the Gladiator intro. You guys know the one, you know. You know, I don't know the words. But it was great song. Anyways, you know, I was wanting to do a video where I did a recap of San Diego Comic-Con with regards to vintage comic books. The big question that sort of comes to my mind, you know, is what's next? Like, truly, what is actually going to be next? You know, not just for, like, oh, what movie book is going to go crazy, whatever, what, you know, what's super big grail is going to go up for sale at the next auction, you know, when are we going to get the 10.0 on the CGC census? Like, what's next for the hobby, you know, for the industry of vintage comic collecting? I tried doing this video inside my normal recording setup, and it didn't feel, I don't know, off the cuff enough. I thought that doing a hike with you guys would be more interesting. You know, at least we can shake it up, do something a little bit different. I kind of feel bad because I was doing vlogs at San Diego, and I recorded one that I posted, and I actually did record a couple other ones that I didn't post because I just didn't know if they were going to be interesting, and I also felt pretty cringe doing them. You know, even right now as I'm recording on this hike, it's pretty cringy. You know, I just had somebody walk by me, and I was like, this guy's totally thinking to himself, like, oh God, this guy's on a hike right now and he's recording himself. I know, it's cringe. But I thought that this would be fun, okay? Whatever, there's probably like 50 influencers on this trail anyways. Who cares? All right, let's move on. Those vlogs that I did do, you know, I watched them back, and actually they were kind of good. I liked the feel, I liked the tone of them. So I thought I would try it here. I went to the show, and it was a lot of fun. San Diego, so far, is my all-time favorite comic book con. Nothing beats it. But from a vintage comic collecting standpoint, every year it just gets smaller and smaller, less and less people. And this year in particular was especially noticeable on my end. Just so you know, that's the valley right there. Burbank, Studio City, North Hollywood, things of that nature. And even more so in the section that is getting smaller, what is also very evident is you have a booth like Torpedo Comics. You know, Torpedo, big dealer out in Las Vegas. They had a booth this year, and they didn't even bring vintage comic books to their booth because, you know, they sort of felt like there's no real need to. You know, there's no demand there. And so that, coupled with a bunch of other things where, you know, the vintage section used to be all vintage books, all the dealers, all the booths were next to each other. But this year, it was like vintage sections, and then interspersed in those sections, you had like a modern publisher. And mind you, this is called the Gold and Silver Pavilion or whatever it is, so it's supposed to specifically be the vintage section, but it's not really. Vintage, it's just not where it's at. You know, it's not cool. And don't get me wrong, I think vintage is awesome. I think it's very cool. But you know what I mean? It's not cool. I think I have a challenge, I suppose, that I want to lob out in the community. And that's, how are you going to get new people into the comic book hobby? How are you going to get new people collecting comic books? Let me pause that. I'll do a little bit of an anecdote, and then maybe you guys can see where I'm coming from. So I was talking to one dealer, and he sold a huge book at the show, like 6-figure book. But I had been asking him, I was like, oh, you know, how was the show and how did it go? And he was like, oh, the show was great. It was off the hook, blah, blah, blah. And he told me about his deal that he got, you know, the 6-figure one. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, that's great. So who'd you sell it to? You know, who wanted it? And he's like, oh, I sold it to another dealer. And he's like, he sold it to another dealer. And then so I asked him, I was like, oh, well, I mean, do you care whenever you're selling to dealers versus like collectors or people that just want the books? And he's like, nah, it's all the same to me, either way. And when he said that, I thought to myself, like, isn't that concerning? Isn't that an issue? Like, I know you had a great show. I know you got yours. You sold a 6-figure book. But if success in this area is just selling a big book to another dealer, and that dealer sells that big book maybe eventually to another dealer, or maybe a really big whale collector, are we really thriving? You know what I mean? Is vintage comics really thriving? You know, when I go to the con, it's just, again, it's not that poppin'. It's just not the cool place to be. You go over to Artist Alley, you go to like all the indie new publishers, and there's life there. And I realize that's kind of the nature of what this is. Obviously, new is new. So if you have new creators, new artists, new signing events, of course that's where the young kids are going to go, or the younger people, because new is new. But how are you going to onboard these people over to vintage? I'm not here to say that comic books are dying. I mean, well, in a way that they are. I mean, but I don't know if it's dying any more than any other industry really is dying, like movies or whatever. I mean, there's so much entertainment now. Everything's super competitive. The art form is, you know, an old school art form as it is, so it has a lot of pain points to deal with as far as competing for, you know, kids' attention. I mean, kids would rather watch TikTok than read a comic book. I mean, that's just obviously true. And you know, look, I don't have the answers. I certainly don't have the answers. In fact, a lot of why I'm making this video is throwing the question out to the community, because maybe somebody has the answers. I mean, I have some answers. At least I think that I have some answers. But I'm not Marvel or DC. You know, I'm not them. So I can't create a top-down initiative for bringing people into comic books. And I think the reality is, we can't wait for Marvel and DC to do it, because they're not going to do it. And I think that that's similar to how I feel with the vintage section. It's like, we're just going to show up to the same cons, the same shows, put the same books on the wall, and just wait for people to buy the 6-figure book. And by people, I mean another dealer. You know what I mean? Is that what we're going to do in the next 10 years? We're just going to wait. We're just all going to do the same thing until this all comes crashing down. If you walked over that mountain there, went over it, that would be where the Hollywood sign is. But I don't think we're going to make it there. I don't know if the rant's going to go on. I know I was watching clips of Network last night. You know, the scene where he's like, I don't know what to tell you and all this stuff, but you got to get mad. I feel like I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. I don't have the answers, but you got to get mad. You got to go out there into nature and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. What are we going to do at the Comic Cons? What are the vendors going to do? What are the dealers going to do? Why don't the dealers give free comic books to kids? Why don't they do, you know, some kind of collaboration with the pop figurine booth? You know what I mean? The only one that can do it is you and me. We're the only one that's going to do it. You know, I think back to the guy who had the LCS, who invented Free Comic Book Day. All these years, I never realized that Free Comic Book Day wasn't an invention of Marvel and DC. It was just a guy. It was just a guy in California in his store who was like, what's the best way to get kids into the store? Let me give them some free comic books. And so I kind of think the same thing. What's going on? See, I'm so cringe right now. I'm just filming myself talking on a hike and I'm sweating. And I don't want to get in my head because I don't know if I want to post this anymore. But I'm going to, because this is important. Free Comic Book Day was invented by somebody who just decided to do it. That's freaking amazing. And I think that that's where my frustration is. You know, with the dealers and the vintage, the gold and silver pavilion, the vintage section. You know, even the bigger companies, CGCs and Heritage and all this, you know, they're all making money off of the backs of this great art form. So how are we going to give that back, you know, to the next generation? I just thought about making this video. You know, it was certainly my takeaway from San Diego this year more than others. You know, the vintage section, it just felt stodgy. Felt like it needed new life, something. And that something is not going to come via just waiting for whatever to happen. You have to make that thing happen. I do have some ideas of things that I want to do. And I'm working on those things. And I will continue to work on those things. But I want to throw it out to you guys, you know. What's going to happen? What should people do? I know some of the comments are going to be, well, if Marvel and DC wrote better stories that kids would want to read, I don't actually think that that would do anything. I'm going to be honest. Marvel and DC have done that. Mark Silvestri wrote one of the best freaking Batmans ever. And nobody cared about it. Because nobody does care. Because what's more interesting to talk about is comic book drama. And I get it. I'm not innocent of this. I like drama too. I think it's fun to talk about every now and again. But I don't know. Is this what it is? Like we're just going to sling mud, talk drama, and grasp at the last straws until that last greater fool is left holding that last comic book bag because there's no one else that wants to buy comic books. Anyways, I should probably wrap it up now. I think I've gone on long enough. I doubt anyone is watching this long. This might be one of the worst performing videos I've ever made. And actually, my arm is getting really tired. So I'm going to stop walking. I'm going to let this person walk by me. And I'm going to wrap it up now. So anyways, what do you guys think? What's next for vintage? I got flies in my face. How do I end this? I think we all got to be proactive in the hobby and think of ways that we can grow things and onboard and educate the next generation. Because Marvel and DC are definitely not going to do that. Oh, now I remember. You know what I have an issue with? You know what really grinds my gears? You guys were about to turn off the video and you guys saw that I probably have like another 3 minutes left over until you're like, oh, I guess he's wrapping it up. No, sir. Let me sip of water. Second win, let's go. Okay, so like, I don't get why they don't constantly celebrate the history of comic books. That's the most important thing. Actually, I do get this. Let me start here. Here's the problem. Marvel and DC have no incentive to get anybody to collect comic books. They kind of do. because they have a publishing company, but it's not profitable for them, so they don't actually care. But they have no incentive for people to buy comic books or collect comic books, and even more so, they have even more no incentive for people to buy back issues, because they're not seeing any value from that. You know, if a kid buys an AF-15, they don't see any of that money, so why do they care if people buy back issues? They'd rather sell you the new AF-15 facsimile, or, you know, the trade paperback that has all the stories in it, which isn't, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but they're certainly not celebrating, you know, the history of stuff. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that there's probably a lot of awkwardness with royalties of creators and all that stuff, and a lot of politics here. But can you imagine, like, I'm at San Diego Comic-Con and the whole Marvel booth is all MCU, which is great. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. Promote Deadpool, Wolverine, as you should. But amongst their entire booth, they have like costumes of, you know, Deadpool. They got the shield from Captain America. But they didn't think, like, in the podium, you know, in the middle of the booth, like, throw in a 9/8 New Mutants 98. Throw in a 9/8 Hulk 181. You know, show that off as well. These characters that are on this screen that everyone's going to watch this movie were created in these books. But again, they have no incentive to spread that knowledge and information to the next gen of kids because they don't see money for secondary sales. So you can't wait for them. You can't wait for them to do this, even though every other industry does this. How many times when you watch WWE, you see, like, oh, the Bret Hart documentary is going to come out so that they can sell old school Bret Hart t-shirts. Like, they do this all the time in other industries. Sports history is huge. They always talk about Babe Ruth and baseball, etc. But comic books, they don't do this. And it's a problem. And so now I'm really going to end the video after getting my second wind. And yeah, that's really it. I had my network moment at San Diego Comic-Con. I had to get mad. And I had to say it while doing a hike. Are you guys still watching? Can you imagine being me, going on this hike and talking out loud on this quiet trail with all these other people who walked by me? It was so embarrassing. This was very embarrassing. I hope you guys enjoyed this, at least. I hope you thought it was somewhat of a fun format. Because, yeah, it was kind of awkward. Which is why I didn't post my vlog at San Diego Comic-Con. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. That was me doing a bit of a hike, asking the question, what's next for vintage comic books? Let me know what you guys think. And until then, touch some grass.